So you're thinking of selling because you can't stand hearing your noisy neighbors anymore. And well, you have a shared wall, a party wall, and there is a way to soundproof it where you will barely hear anything from your noisy neighbors from across the wall. And the thing is they don't even have to be that noisy, because even if your townhouse or duplex was built up to code, typically code is built up to 50 STC, a 50 STC rating, which is good enough to drown out normal talking voice. So if they go and raise their voice, you'll most likely hear what they're saying, or you'll at least hear a mumble. So the first thing that you need to do is, well, you need to find out, you need to know if there is any insulation in between you and them, if there's anything in that wall, or if that wall cavity is hollow. And the easiest way to do that is just to punch a hole right through the wall, take a flashlight, and look inside. If it's hollow, then you will need to remove the drywall entirely and add some insulation, because insulation, it's not a noise blocker, but it's a noise absorber. And also, in that chamber, all those sound waves that goes through the wall, it reverberates inside the wall and makes it louder. So that insulation essentially will drown out, will absorb that reverberation, and that's how it's all part of noise reduction and not necessarily soundproofing. But if you look inside and there's already insulation in there, whether it's pink insulation or another type of insulation, then you can just leave the wall as is. However, most of the time, there won't be any insulation in between the units, so you'll need to remove the drywall in entirety for this to work, because you need to not only add insulation, but you need to take care of those electrical outlet boxes, completely sealing them. And the only way to do that is with an open wall. So if there's no insulation there already and you're just soundproofing one or two walls, I would suggest you adding some acoustic mineral wool, because it does work a little bit better than standard pink fiberglass insulation. But if there's already pink fiberglass insulation in the wall, I wouldn't really go ahead and remove the drywall and switch out that insulation for the rock wool. But if there's no insulation there already, so while you're adding that insulation, go look at the electrical outlet boxes and the light switches. As you can see, those boxes, they are full of little holes, and even if you add extra drywall or some insulation into your wall, making your wall thicker, you need to seal the wall completely. And leaving those holes in the wall where those electrical outlets are will make noise travel quite freely from your unit to their unit and vice versa. So using something like putty pads to wrap around those electrical outlet boxes will work in sealing those holes. These types of pads were originally used, or are typically used, for fire prevention. If there's a fire that starts inside that little electrical outlet box, then the putty pads will slow the fire down typically. It also works well at blocking sound because it blocks all of those holes. If you didn't end up removing the drywall because you already had insulation there, you can still seal that electrical outlet box a little bit if you open the faceplate. But before doing this, go ahead and shut off the breaker to that electrical outlet and then remove the faceplate. When you look at what's inside, you'll notice that the drywall and the box, there's usually a little space in between them. You need to seal that little gap with acoustical caulking. Now, acoustical caulking is just like regular caulking, but it stays rubbery over time, so it doesn't crack, letting more noise in. Sealing that crack will not work as good as using something like a putty pad, but it does work well enough to at least stop a little bit of sound coming through from the other unit or from you to them. After you're done adding the insulation and you've sealed those electrical outlet boxes, the type of drywall that you should add is a 5/8" drywall instead of a 1/2" drywall, because the 1/2" drywall is just not as thick and it will stop less noise. And paying $2, $3, $4 more per sheet for the 5/8" is the way to go. Now you have a couple of options. You can either just add one layer of drywall if you're in the kitchen and it's going to be too difficult to modify everything if you add 2 layers of drywall. You can just add 1 layer of drywall, but if you're doing this in a bedroom where you easily can add 2 layers of drywall, that's what I would suggest you do, is add 2 layers of 5/8" drywall. If you are going to add 2 layers of drywall, if you're doing it in a bedroom where you don't have to modify anything, it's just an open wall, then you can add something in between the 2 layers of drywall called an acoustical compound. Now, an acoustical compound, it is more on the pricier side because you have to add 2 tubes of this stuff to actually make it work to an extent. So what this does, you just add it on the drywall in a random pattern, and it's supposed to turn the sound waves into heat, basically reducing the energy in those sound waves and making it less noisy. But it doesn't work as well as what you would think because of the high price tag of almost between $20 to $30 per tubes, and you need 2 tubes per drywall. There is, however, another type of material that you can use that works in a lot of the same ways, because any type of liquid that you would add between 2 layers of drywall, physics will tell you that it will turn the sound waves into heat, essentially reducing them. So you don't really need to go ahead and pay a high price tag for an acoustical compound. You can go ahead and add something like a carpet glue that stays relatively tacky. And the one that you see on your screen works quite well, and all you do is you add it in between the drywall in a random pattern, and then you add your second layer of drywall, and at least if it doesn't reduce more than, let's say, 1 decibel or 1.5 decibel, you didn't really spend that much money. So that's one way to look at it. But every decibel counts, because when you're dealing with that much noise, if you can just spend a little bit more to get rid of a couple more decibels, it usually is worth it. Now, once all that is done and your wall is reinstalled, it should make a huge difference in noise transfer between units if everything was done correctly. But let's say that you didn't really want to remove the drywall because it's just too much work, and you want to do something that is a lot more DIY, and that actually works quite well in blocking noise that a lot of people never really think about, is adding a wall unit that you can either use as a huge bookshelf or just a wall unit and have cabinets in the bottom to add storage. And that space will block noise from room to room. But the trick is to have it on the entire wall. If you just have it on half of the wall, it's not really going to work that well. But if you have one huge wall that it's just the separation wall, there's no doors or anything, which would be typical for a party wall, then fill the wall up with a bookshelf, put some books on the shelf or some decorations. But one trick is to have this backing, to have something in between the wall and the bookshelf, and not just to have the wall right there, because just adding books on a bookshelf will not be enough. You need this backing right here, and what you should do is add something called mass-loaded vinyl in between the bookshelf and the wall. So mass-loaded vinyl, it comes in a roll. It's a rubber type material, and it's very heavy and dense, and it blocks and absorbs noise. What you do with the mass-loaded vinyl, you attach it on this section of the wall unit, and then you attach the wall unit onto the wall. Just make sure that it encompasses the entire wall, not leaving any gaps, and you will notice a considerable difference in noise transfer from your unit to their unit. So at least there are ways to do it where you don't really have to rip out the drywall completely, and there are more DIY ways on how to do it. But the thing is, it's not cheap. But the money that you saved by not having to remove the drywall and really rip everything out and reattach it together is going to be a lot less than the cost of the mass-loaded vinyl is going to be cheaper than that. So that's one thing to consider. So, which will turn into quite a project, but it is a lot cheaper and easier than to pack everything up and sell and move away. So hopefully by watching this video, it saves you from moving out of your house and enjoying it. But also, if you want to know more cheaper ways on soundproofing a wall, different ways, this video right here will show you how. Cheap budget ways on how to soundproof a wall. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, assuming that you subscribed.